Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Beyond the 90. We've got a very special guest and a very special video for you. We've got Alex and Akash fantastically, and our special guest, Rob Tanner from The Athletic. Rob, it's great to have you once again. How are you doing?
I'm great, thank you very much. Getting over a bout of COVID, which forced me out of the Brighton game, but that's part of the course for Leicester City, isn't it? People missing games available. So I suppose I've been affected as much as the players. So yeah, I'm itching to get back at it when the international or this little break is over.
Yeah, it's every time it comes to these kind of 2-week break, like, okay, thank God for Leicester City, and then you're kind of itching to get back into it. Definitely, I am. Again, in this video, for everybody that's watching, we're going to be talking about some of the summer contracts. We're going to talk about January transfer window, some of the summer rebuild that will potentially happen as well. We've got Alex and Akash have got questions on that as well. So we're going to start with the first thing, as something that we're not surprised at, Rob, to be honest. We've not got any money in January. It's not too surprising. Leicester City don't do a lot of business in January. However, Brendan Rodgers, I think for the first time, has come out and said we've got no money, which I think was quite, even though we expected it, I think it was still surprising come from the manager and how direct and straightforward it was.
Yeah, I mean, I thought, because I was in that Zoom press conference, and I thought what he said was taken a little bit out of context by some, not by the reporters reporting it, but I think a lot was read into that. What he was basically trying to say about when he was talking about the pinnacle of reaching a pinnacle of finishing fifth the last 2 seasons and winning the FA Cup, and perhaps that's the pinnacle for Leicester City. What he's trying to say is that the club has tried to make giant strides to catch up with the big six over a number of years, and they've competed with them superbly on the pitch over the last couple of years. But financially, they're still struggling to keep up with them. And as we're going to get into financially, you know, the pandemic has really hit Leicester compared to their rivals. And so it's a moving target, and they're starting to pull away again. And then you've got like the likes of Newcastle with all that fresh money coming into the Premier League. Aston Villa have been spending a lot of money that, you know, they've got very rich owners now. So they're major players. And then you've still got the likes of West Ham and Everton who seem to find money to throw at it as well. Whereas Leicester, you know, it's been a bit of a problem for them. The owners are in the tourism industry, and there's no industry that's been affected more by a global pandemic than that. So, you know, it is a time for consolidation. And I think when we get to, I know people might be a bit frustrated they haven't signed anybody in January, but when we get to next summer, I think you might see a little bit of a rebuild going on. I'm sure you'll want to talk about contracts, but there'll be a number of players going into their final year of their contracts in the summer as well. So I can see quite a few comings and goings in the summer, and a rebuild, a reset button being pressed in many ways so they can go again. So the rest of this season, I feel like it's going to be a consolidation. They're just going to, you know, it's going to be up and down. It's going to be very bitty with players coming back from injuries and stuff like that. It's not going to be smooth sailing. So the Leicester fans really need to weather this little storm. I mean, we haven't had many storms. It's been sunny skies for such a long time that they might need to just batten down the hatches a little bit for the next few months.
I guess we'll have to, yeah. I think, and I think at the moment a lot of Leicester fans are relatively realistic. And go, okay, we're going to try and wave this out until summer. Alex, do you have any questions on that, on the transfer, or any questions on the summer transfer window so far?
What, with the summer transfer window, or are we talking about
January transfer window? I'm jumping ahead already.
Yeah, Rob, just one question. I know Rodgers has kind of said that we don't really have any funds, but is there any possibility of bringing any loan deals in? Because I know we are kind of bare at the back, but is there any kind of players or any possibilities of, you know, possible loan signings just coming in for the last 6 months just to get us across the line?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of conversations behind the scenes about this. As time ticks on, it's looking most unlikely that they'll bring anybody in now. They were trying to bring in a centre-back on loan. There was the usual suspects that were thrown at them. Phil Jones at Man United was one. But I think after what's happened in terms of the Vestergaard signing, I mean, it's obvious that he's struggling to adapt to Leicester City's style of play, that he's not naturally the right fit. I don't think Phil Jones, I think there would have been concerns about his injury record as well. I mean, you've got a crippling injury crisis at the club, and you don't want to bring somebody in who's only going to be able to play a couple of games and they're going to be out again. So that one was quickly dismissed. They decided then they were going to go for a certain profile, which is a young up-and-coming centre-back that could come in. Somebody who's aggressive, somebody who can defend space. I mean, you know, people running in behind them. I mean, we've seen that with Vestergaard. He's not comfortable with that when he's exposed one-on-one. But I think what has alleviated that need to bring in is two things. James Justin coming back from injury and looking so good already. I know he's still rusty. He's going to take him a bit of time to get back to his best, but I still think the way he played against Brighton for large spells is very positive in terms of he can be aggressive. He can push into midfield and challenge people. When he was playing right back, I highlighted it in an article that I did this week that, you know, the amount of times he got into the opposition penalty box. I mean, not many of the fullbacks at Leicester City do that. So he's, you know, he is aggressive. He can defend space. He can come in. He can play fullback, right and left, and play as a centre back if required. Certainly in a back three, but also Hamza Chowdhury's performances since they dropped him in there as well. Again, Brendan was looking for somebody who was mobile. He likes pace at the back. And so he's come in, and that sort of alleviated the real concern, because obviously they're going to be out without Johnny Evans. Wesley Fofana has been out such a long time. That was a terrible injury. He's going to need a bit more time. But those two have sort of alleviated the real concern that they're going to be left completely short at the back.
Yeah, I think so. Again, it's really funny that you say that. Our best, I think, defenders have all been centre midfielders or centre backs this season. So, central defensive midfielders this season, which is just, you couldn't have predicted that. But not that you can't predict anything with that.
Changing those, the modern game's changing. It's more about mobility now and athleticism. Whereas before, you know, we used to, when I'm of the generation when centre halves used to be a head on a stick. They used to stand there and head everything and kick everything, and it's totally changed now. They've got to be athletes, and they've got to be good on the ball in the modern game. So it makes it real. I mean, I know Brendan described Hamza as Leicester's Mascherano, but you can see why he made that comment. I know there's a massive gulf in terms of what he's achieved playing at Barcelona and Hamza's so early in his career. I mean, it seems like a silly comparison, but in terms of the type of player they are, I can see why he said that, because it's that mobility, that aggression in the tackle, that ability on the ball to play forward. It's the modern game.
Yeah, and just again, as you're saying, the times are changing. Akash, do you have any questions as well in regards to the January transfer window as well?
Can we expect any outgoings from our camp?
Again, I think there might have been a possibility beforehand that a couple would have gone out, but with the unavailability of certain players, they can't afford to let any more go out. I mean, if they're calling off fixtures because of the lack of availability of players, it wouldn't look great. It wouldn't look great if they started letting other players going out on loan. But there are a number of those youngsters that are coming through that really do need loans, and they really do need regular first team football now. We've seen how it's benefited the likes of Kiernan Dewsbury Hall. You know, he went out at Blackpool and then had a great spell at Luton. Harvey Barnes is another great example. You know, they learn to play proper football, if you like. The under-23s is great. Premier League 2, it's good. Technically, they're all very good, but it doesn't really matter if they win or lose. But when you're playing senior football, first-team football, certainly in the lower leagues, people's livelihoods depend on it. And, you know, they've got win bonuses and goal bonuses, and, you know, it can affect their families. So winning means everything to those guys. So they're going into that environment and developing and learning. And so I think the lads that we've seen already, the Lewis Brunts and people like that have come through, they'll probably need a loan. Ben Nelson is one that I know we haven't seen him at first team level, but he's been around the first team training wise and been on the bench a number of times. He's only 17, but he's a fantastic talent. They've got real high hopes for him. But I think he'll probably need a loan, go out and experience senior football, and then we'll probably see a different Ben. He'll probably be ready then to come into the first team. It's very different for centre backs than it is for forward players. You know, if you make a mistake at the back, it's a goal in your net. If you make a mistake forward, you lose. I mean, like we saw with Will Alves when he came on, bless him, he was only 16. He only had about 5 minutes, and after 2 minutes, Brendan's there wagging his finger at him, saying, Too many touches. You're going to come off if it's been the shortest debut ever. If he's got to learn to pass the ball and play as a team player, but obviously he was so excited to make his debut, and he's a freestyler as well, so he loves to hog the ball. But you know, he'll learn. He'll go out on loan as well at some stage, I'm sure, over the next couple of years, and he'll learn about how serious it is at that level.
Yeah, there's a lot, and I think Akash, you had another question regarding loans and some of the ages of some players that are going out on loans as well.
So why are academy players not sent on loans before they hit the 20th mark?
Say again, sorry, Akash.
I mean, until they reach 20, most of them are not sent on loans to other clubs to flesh their talents out and try out other ventures. So why is that?
Well, a lot of it's to do with whether they're ready for that step. I mean, around all the time of the postponement, and I saw a lot of people in the media, mainstream media in this country, going on about, well, they've got the 23s, they've got the under 18s, they should be able to field them. But you can't just throw these kids in to that environment. As I said, it's very serious football. You can't throw them in until they're ready, not just physically, and then some of them are still growing. I mean, Will Howard's 16, he's still got some growing to do. But mentally as well, can they cope with that pressure? Can they cope with fans getting on their back if they make a mistake? They've got to be ready. You've got a duty of care to these youngsters. So I think a lot of the times they look after them in the under 23s, bring them through, nurture them until they think they're ready to go out. Because it's not because they're in a safe environment at the football club. They've got all their friends around them. They've known the coaches since they were kids. Suddenly, if you send them out on loan to Colchester or Carlisle, a long way from home, they've got to leave their parents and, that safe environment, they've got to be ready to be able to deal with that. So I think they're just very cautious about picking the right moments, and it's got to be the right club as well. I know Leicester have had good relationships with Luton in recent years. They do seem to like sending people to Luton because the philosophy of football is very similar there. It's a nice family-friendly club, so it's similar to Leicester in many ways. So that's a club that they probably do like to partner with. So they've just got to be cautious with the development of youngsters because, as much as it's like if you're growing a plant at home and look a beautiful flower, if you're heavy-handed with it right at the start, you'll kill it. But if you nurture it properly, it will develop and grow and bloom. And that's what they're trying to do with the youngsters.
And I think going forward, there is a lot again. I was surprised, especially for the Watford game, how many. Considering again, we had 8 players available for that game from the first 25. Then we substituted again because you were saying Hamza Chowdhury into centre back, which we didn't expect. We have Lewis Brunt again. We had Casey McAteer come on. We had obviously Will Alves. The future for me, that was such an impressive match. Obviously, because Watford were poor, but just the quality and when a player came off and another player came in his place, for example, Vontae Daly Campbell and Marcel Medivadua came in his place, the levels didn't drop at all. And I think you or a couple of other people were saying as well that it's trained through the squad, that Brendan Rodgers has said to them, look, with this younger squad, you've got to be ready at any time for your opportunity. And it was, for me, it was a super impressive moment.
Well, the philosophy at the club is that all the age groups try and play a similar style of football. That way, they're ready. So when they can step up, it's not completely alien to them. The systems of play, the way they're required to play with the ball at their feet, multiple touches. Ben Petty's been praised by Brendan, but Steve Beaglehole before he went part-time did a fantastic job as well, getting these youngsters first team ready. And also, a lot of these youngsters have been in and around and training with the first team for quite some time now. And Brendan's been very quick to get them involved. They haven't always trained consistently with the first team. It all depends on the circumstances. But going right back to the first lockdown when the pandemic started, they got Luke Thomas in training with the first team all the way through that. And then, you saw he's come into the first team now and he's flourished. So they've been trying to, and Keenan Dewsbury Hall as well. So they've been trying to do this for a while now where so when they step up, it's not a giant stride. I mean, it is a huge stride still. It is a huge step for them to get into the first team. But at least they're a little bit more comfortable in their surroundings. They know that some of the first team players, it's not unusual for them to see Jamie Vardy because they've trained with him or they've been in a gym with him or things like that. So, that's what they've been trying to do. So there's a philosophy of how they play that's throughout the academy going into the first team.
Yeah, no, I definitely think so. Again, I'll hand over to Alex after this last question. I think there's one of them that I want to mention, especially there's a rumor going around recently about it's a player called James McAtee from Man City, who looks like he's in the same. A lot of people comparing him to, not Bernardo Silva, David Silva, and obviously Man City player. Do you think, again, we've seen players like Ben Grist and Brad Young in the past reject people like Chelsea and a topper team, and he's come from Man City academy, but knowing there's just so much space, there's so much congestion in that space. Is that where do you think not we can develop our own? We can take some of the best talents from across Europe and then develop them from other massive top 6 academies and then develop them. Is that probably the next step for us?
There's a pathway at Leicester City, and people can see it. They can see that youngsters coming into the club. I mean, there's a number of youngsters they've taken from Man United and other clubs as well. I mean, Lewis Brunt was released by Villa, but Ben Petty knew him from his time working at Villa, and he's brought him in, and he's found that pathway to the first team. Obviously, circumstances have to be right. I mean, I think if the club didn't have all those injuries, then Lewis would probably have had to abide his time a bit more and then gone out on loan and try to earn his stripes that way. But he's been ready to take that opportunity, and I think that is what Leicester do. They look around at the other academies, these huge academies like Man City, and they have a look to see who might be getting through. I mean, Vontae Daly-Campbell's a classic example. Arsenal, he wasn't getting he couldn't see the pathway at Arsenal, and they wanted to keep him, but he was out of contract. Leicester went and got him, and he's found a pathway to the first team as well. So, yeah, I think that is one part of it, but also the scouting network. I mean, I will plug something I'm working on at the moment is looking at how they've recruited around Leicestershire in particular. I mean, how many homegrown youngsters are playing in the first team, and that is not a common thing in the Premier League. That this homegrown youngsters that have come through the academy and now playing. I mean, you got Harvey, you got Kiernan, you got Luke. They've all come through Hamza. They're all Leicestershire lads. Sam Braybrook on the bench, another Leicestershire lad. They've done it brilliantly to spot these talents and nurture them. But they don't just recruit from Leicestershire as well. They've got scouting networks around the world. I know the pandemic's caused a lot of problems with that, and Brexit as well, because they can't bring youngsters in because they need an international transfer certificate. So that's made it more complex. So probably the emphasis is still more on local, but they're still looking everywhere for talent, and we've seen a number of them come through.
Yeah, we definitely have, and the thing is, it seems like there's going to be even more players hopefully in the future. Alex, have you got any comments in regards to that, or we'll just move on to probably the summer rebuild because I don't think there's much happening elsewhere.
Actually, the question I have kind of ties into the summer rebuild. So with all these young players coming in, it seems like our squad is seemingly getting younger and younger. And with so many contracts winding up into their final 12 months coming up in the summer, do you think this is kind of a changing of the guard from the old guard to the new with more younger talent coming in?
Yeah, I do. I think there will be an element of that now. We're starting to see it already with Patson Daka coming in because he's earmarked as Jamie Vardy's eventual successor. I mean, I will say, I think Jamie's got another year left in his contract, and I think they'll give him another year, and he will want to stay and play as long as he can. And until he got that injury, you can't say that he didn't look, he's not slowing down. He's still looking like a top. I mean, Erling Haaland's been praising him today, hasn't he? From what I've seen, talking about how he's been learning from Vardy about how to run in behind defences. So, he's still performing at an incredibly high level. So don't be surprised if he signs another year extension as well. So he'll be around for a number of years. But Patson coming in, that's part of the plan, really, to have that successor coming through. I mean, the big one for the summer, Yuri Tielemans. He's not rejected the contract. Contract's still there. It's still on the table. He just hasn't given an answer on it. He just wants to bide his time and assess all his options. So nothing will happen that I can imagine in this window, but in the summer, we'll see who comes in. He's been linked with so many different clubs. Let's see if those reports are genuine and they're going to come in and make an offer for him. But Leicester will be scouring around Europe now, trying to find somebody who's going to come in and play in a similar way. There's always a succession plan at Leicester, and I think we'll see that in the summer. But there's a number of players that are entering the last year of their contracts, and there's certain players that haven't. I mean, Vestergaard, we'll see what happens. Actually, it hasn't worked so far. We'll see what they do with Yannick. There'll be a number of other players as well. So it'll be interesting in the summer, because I know they're starting to look at the contract situation now. As you saw last night, we reported about Ricardo Pereira's talks on his new contract progressing very well. Expect that to get done. He'll be signing. They'll be looking at some of the other contract situations as well. Charles Unsu will be one that they'll try and get sorted as well, because they do like to protect themselves in the transfer market. They don't like to let young talent go into the final year or 2 years of their contracts. They do try and get them on long-term contracts, because it secures them at the club as well. It strengthens Leicester's hand if somebody else comes in for them. So, it's going to be a busy summer. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think it's going to be. I think we're looking forward to it already. Potentially more than some of the football we're going to play this year, because at times it's not been great. Akash, over to you. Any questions on kind of the summer transfer window as well?
So again, we are going with a mindset that we're going to build a younger squad. So that ponders a delicate area, that you don't have an actual veteran or a person who can be a locker room leader in some scenarios when the team's morale is down, the team has bent their heads down. So I don't see any player when Vardy is amiss to really take in charge of that team, because we saw in the Tottenham game 2-2, after that the morale was really down and they caught us off guard in the dying minutes of the game. So how do we bounce back from that if our approach is just investing in the young talents and expecting two leaders be born out of them?
No, I mean, don't get me wrong, the majority of the squad will be young, but I still think they'll need a core of senior players. I mean, as I said, Vardy, they'll try and keep him around because of the very things you mentioned, Akash, and you make a very good point about the experience in the side. Having said that, the person that made the mistake in the Tottenham game that led to the winner was probably the most experienced outfield player. Well, he was the most experienced outfield. Despite his tender years, Yuri Tielemans has played nearly 400 senior games. So, he's played a lot of Champions League. It was a very uncharacteristic mistake from Yuri there. But you're right. They do need some older heads. Johnny Evans, there's another one they'll want to keep round because of that influence that he has. It's been so unfortunate for him this year with injuries. I mean, when he comes to the club, he started off with an injury, but after that, he's been really consistent in his availability up until the plantar fasciitis foot problem that plagued him at the end of last season and forced him off in the FA Cup final. That actually ruptured. So, I mean, that alleviated the pain in his foot, but then it caused mechanical issues because obviously if you've got a ruptured tendon in your foot, it's hard to run. So that's been a real problem. But then he's come in and he's picked up other problems, and then the hamstring injury. So that's been really unfortunate. I mean, Leicester have been unfortunate with a number of these injuries. They've come at times when Ricardo Pereira, when he broke a leg at Liverpool, you can't legislate for somebody tackling him like that and breaking his leg. And he's another experienced player, an international that they could look to. So they have been unlucky in terms of the injuries to senior players, and they still want senior players in to guide these youngsters. Otherwise, it's very easy for the youngsters to get lost. So, but I still think, though, the philosophy of the club is to develop youngsters. They see more value in that as well, value of buying a player, developing them, and then if somebody does come in and try and sign them, at least they can charge top dollar for him. But they still need a core of senior players.
Yeah, and I think they're hopefully gonna have that over the years. Again, just you mentioned, I've got some of the names down for the summer contract 2023 you were talking about. Obviously, it's a massive list. Again, we'll have a look at the sample. I mean, you've got the likes of Evans, you're mentioning Pereira, as you mentioned yesterday. I saw that article, which was really interesting. Tielemans, Perez, Soyuncu, Bertrand, who was only on a 2-year deal. Napoli's Mendy, which again is another strange one in terms of another one that we kind of forgot about, obviously, with him not signing in the 25-man squad. Hamza Chowdhury, Vardy, and Schmeical. So there's a lot of that, as you were saying, a lot of them experienced players are running out in 2023.
Yeah, it is crazy how it's happened all at once. I mean, normally it's it's been a steady stream of renewals, and because not many players want to leave Leicester. It is a happy camp, and they see the ambition at the club, and the training ground somewhere else. I mean, it's a shame. I mean, I think fans can go down and watch some of the 23s games so they can see a little bit of it for themselves. But it's a fantastic environment. You consider that's where they do most of their work, down the training ground. So that will be great as well, enticing other players, new signings to come. But yeah, the fact that so many are entering into the last year of their contracts, it's very unusual for Leicester. I think that the emphasis has been on Tielemans from what we've seen. So they've been trying for a while. That contract's been on the table for a year. So yeah, if he'd signed, I think you'd see an absolute avalanche of others signing. But there's other players that might be thinking similar to him, that they've done well at Leicester. They've achieved a lot at Leicester. Can they achieve much more at Leicester? Is the grass greener elsewhere? There might be somebody like Wilfred Ndidi that might be having a little look around, thinking, I wonder if somebody would come in for me from, a regular from Champions League, stuff like that. So, yeah, there's a lot of variables involved in this scenario. But I know Leicester will want to try and tie down as many as they possibly can to new deals.
Yeah, they will try. Akash, any other questions on terms of some of the contracts we've got going on?
Talking about the contracts and transfers, I feel like Brendan Rodgers, comparing Brendan Rodgers directly with Steven Gerrard, who has been an apprentice to Brendan Rodgers, he has somewhat of a massive pulling power, because these are also ambitious players like Philippe Coutinho or anyone that Aston Villa has signed in the recent past. They are coming and entrusting the project. They are trusting the manager's vision. And Aston Villa has not been one of the bigger players in the Premier League, but somewhere we have been there. We have qualified for Europe in back-to-back seasons. Despite that, our pulling power when it comes to it is a little bit less, because our contact talks with Berardi, Tarkowski, they always were not aggressive enough to really persuade the player. They always had second thoughts. They had to assess 2 or 3 teams and cherry pick around them. So why does that keep on happening? Do you see that Brendan Rodgers is lacking some sort of influence over other players in terms of Premier League quality managers, or is it something that Leicester has to improve upon in the coming seasons?
Well, for start with, James Tarkowski, from what I understand, wanted to come to Leicester, but Burnley wouldn't sell. So, that it was taken out of the player's hands. He saw what we see at Leicester is a club that's progressing well. Look where Burnley are now. They've done fantastically well, but they're not moving on to another level, whereas Leicester have moved on to another level. Villa are an interesting one at the moment, because that is a huge club, Aston Villa. I know you're saying they've not been a major players in the Premier League for a long time, but fan base. I'm from that area. They've got an enormous fan base, bigger than Leicester's. We see it on the social media profiles and stuff, and our traffic on the Athletic website. They are a big club, and they've now got big money as well. So and Coutinho's relationship with Gerrard from before, when he was a teammate, would also have been a massive carrot for him as well. It also helps the fact that Villa are willing to pay a large chunk of his huge wages at Barcelona, which Leicester weren't, because it would break their pay structure at the club. And they've got a system where there's not a massive discrepancy between a lot of the players. I think Vardy and Schmeical are the highest earners at the club. Then suddenly you've got a Coutinho coming in, and he's earning 50 grand a week more than them. It might cause problems. They don't want to do that. He is a talent, but he hasn't played a lot of football the last couple of years. So it's a bit of a gamble from Villa, but if they've got the money to gamble with, they're going to do it. So I don't think it's a lack of a draw factor for Leicester in that sense. Brendan Rodgers, he might not be a big name like Steven Gerrard, but Steven Gerrard made his name as a player. He's done very well so far in his managerial career, but Brendan's got a good reputation for being a coach that develops players and works with players and looks after players. And I think there's a lot of people that still want to come and play for Leicester because of Brendan Rodgers. So Yeah, interesting interesting to see how that will develop. I think as well, when people look at the Premier League, they do see the big six, and they think, well, that's the club I want to go to. Unless, and this is what the market Leicester looking, there are likes of a Tielemans struggling at Monaco, wanting to get more game time, and Leicester have seen something in him, brought him over, played him regularly, and you've seen him flourish now. He's a regular in the Belgium international side. So, that's the sort of level that Leicester look at, really, in terms of trying to attract big name, established players who are on mega money. I don't think Leicester are in that market.
No, I don't think so either. And I think the way that they've worked, obviously, is quite obviously it's fantastic. And even from top six fans have gone, right, the way you do this is fantastic. In terms of obviously the manager, do you think the club still see him as the long-term future for Leicester City? Obviously, we've seen him. We've seen a lot of teams, especially this year, come in for him massively in terms of there's every window, even though Brendan Rodgers got 6 of his back teeth talking about I'm happy at Leicester. Do you still think that there's probably the ambition to try and go on to the next level, or do you think he's trying to build himself for the long term here?
I get the impression, and I could be wrong, because it's the nature of football. There's not a lot of longevity. People do move around between clubs. I mean, the likes of Vardy and Schmeical are extraordinary, aren't they? Really, one club men in terms of Vardy, in terms of professional, and Schmeical being there for over well over a decade. But Brendan, I get the impression, if you look at his career, he's never been anywhere longer than 3 seasons. It's always what's considered to be a third season syndrome with him. And he's experiencing tough times again in this third full season. But I think he wants to stay. I think he looks around and he sees what Leicester are trying to do. I mean, I think he's a bit frustrated. He might like a bit more financial backing in this window because of the problems he's had, but the money just isn't there for him to have. And having spent £15 million on Vestergaard, perhaps if there was somebody there, they would go, hang on a second, we'll just hold fire on this. We don't want to throw any more money away. So I get the impression he knows he's in a good place. He's in a good situation. He's at a club where, they will back him. They will try and back him if they can. He's obviously the backing the club and the players in terms of the training ground. Fantastic plans for the new stadium. And the surrounding. It's not just the stadium with the arena and the Wembley Way type avenue that's going to lead down to the ground as well. I think you can see the ambition there. But who knows if as all the route. I mean, he's been linked with so many clubs, hasn't he? I mean, when Arteta was struggling, it was Rodgers for Arsenal, and then Solskjaer, it was Rodgers for United, and
Newcastle.
We've seen that so many. Newcastle as well. Yeah, we've seen it all like that, but there's been no approaches for him. And from what I understand, he's quite happy. I know there was a bit of speculation about him moving back to the northwest, but I think that was more to do with his wife than feeling settled and feeling secure than anything really to do with Leicestershire. Because I know that he loved living up by Bradgate Park and going for a walk around there and having a coffee in the post office coffee shop and stuff like that. So, I don't think he's in desperate desire to get out but he is an ambitious manager. And if a big club did come knocking, I'm sure he would consider it.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Akash, in terms of Alex, in terms of any other questions in terms of the summer rebuild, because I think that's pretty much. I think that's the next bit I'm going to want to get onto.
So I am going to backpedal just a bit. I feel like with the summer transfer window, I feel like it's going to be important to see which players leave to bring in the funds in order to facilitate that type of a window. Would you agree with me on that? And I'm not going to ask about players because for the specifics, but do you feel like that is kind of like the key importance in order for the club to rebuild, is that they're going to have to see some players leave in order to bring those players in? Because when we talk about funds, we don't have funds right now. So for the summertime, I feel like that's going to be such an important part of it.
Yeah, I mean, the last summer was the first summer since they won the title that a big player or an important player didn't leave, but they still spent £55 million in that window, and that was a big outlay for Leicester City. If Tielemans doesn't sign his contract, somebody comes in for him, I can imagine them getting 25-30 million for him, even though he's going into the last year of his contract. That will all be reinvested back into the team. It's how they do it. I can imagine there will be some funds made available as well on top of that, because as I said, you know, they are a club that want to grow and invest. It's just making sure those finances are available, and they've got a lot of financial commitments at the moment. As I said, with the training ground, I know in the past, you know, the sales of Chilwell and Maguire have helped in that respect. But also the stadium project is a huge one. It is a huge project. It's going to take a lot of finance. It's going to eclipse what the training ground was. So, you know, they've got to be prudent as well. They don't want to put the club in any sort of jeopardy. We don't want to end up like Derby. So I think they're very prudent in the way they run the club. And I know that might frustrate some fans because they think, right, well, you know, we've won the title. We've been finishing 5th. We've been in the top 4. We've won the FA Cup. We should now be spending 50, 60, 70 million pounds on players and paying 150 grand, 200 grand a week on wages. Leicester City aren't in that bracket. They're not in that bracket. And I don't think they ever will be, if I'm honest, because the global reach of the Big Six is just extraordinary. And that generates so much more income as well. Leicester are trying to develop that area of the business, I mean, Akash, I mean, you're a Leicester fan and you're in India. Whereabouts in India? Whereabouts in India are you? Are you whereabouts?
I am from Calcutta, Kolkata. So
yeah. So I
towards
mean,
Bangladesh.
the reach of the Premier League. But why did you pick Leicester and not Man United, Man City, Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea? Why Leicester?
Me and 50 odd people took that decision because we resonated with the mentality of the club when we escaped that relegation part season before the Premier League title. So that was our first love, and Esteban Cambiaso played a huge part in that decision. And from then onwards, I think we have enjoyed the glorified times of Leicester City, one after the other. Jamie Vardy breaking the record, Premier League title, one after the other, as I said. So we have been hooked, and we have been loyal, ardent fans of Leicester City from here.
Well, that's the market that Leicester are looking at, you, Akash. They're trying to find people like you around the world to follow them and grow their global brand, but they're miles behind Liverpool. And I experienced it when we went to Hong Kong in the Premier League trophy a few years back. You know, there was Crystal Palace, West Bromwich Albion, Leicester and Liverpool there, and everybody was wearing a Liverpool shirt. The second highest number of shirts you saw were Leicester ones, but by far and away, it was Liverpool. So they've got huge global reach around the world. That's what the Premier League is. It's an English Premier League, but it's a global Premier League, really. I mean, the fact that, Alex, you're Canadian Foxes as well. You know, you're another example. You know, Leicester can touch these fans around the world. Their story, their underdog story. You know, everybody loves an underdog that can rise up and challenge the elite. It's like Star Wars, isn't it? The Rebel Alliance taking on the Imperials. You know, it's that sort of element, isn't it? The small fry taking on the big cheeses. And but that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to grow that global brand, to have more fans like you around the world that can help them. Because in this global pandemic, it's those ones with the biggest reach, the biggest financial clout that have been able to survive, weather the storm, and still invest.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. And one thing as well, in terms of like finances, obviously, I'm not sure if you know too much about this, but obviously we've got a new sponsor in terms of the FPS kit. And it was first time they've changed to King Power for quite a while now. Is there going to be a move kind of away from this King Power brand a little bit? Not because we don't like, I think there was something put in recently about obviously the Newcastle takeover and the links between there. And they've kind of changed the rules a little bit. So will we see less King Power and more kind of brands of other being associated with Leicester City as to kind of distance themselves a little bit from the King Power brand? There's not of this idea of, well, there's a kind of a crossover between the King Power brand and the Leicester City brand.
Well, Leicester City is still massively important to the King Power brand. I mean, the fact that I've just said what I said about global fans and Akash and Alex being here, you know, you wear Leicester City kit, it's got King Power on it. You know, they've got a walking advert around the world. I mean, I hadn't heard of King Power until they bought Leicester City. So it's still, it's probably the biggest advert that company can have to own Leicester City around the world. Having said that, they will always be looking to generate new revenue streams, new sponsors, new partners that can come on board and help them as well. Because as I said, King Power haven't had it easy over the last couple of years. It's been really challenging for the company. in terms of, you know, their revenue and tourism, hotels, duty-free, airports. If nobody's going through an airport because there's no flights, yeah, it's going to be very difficult for them. And I think Top has spent a lot of time back in Thailand recently, just trying to, you know, look after that side of the business first. And Susan Whelan's been running the football club. So, yeah, it's still very important to them, but they still want other partners in. So if they got another shirt sponsor in that could pay probably more than them, you know, they might consider it, but I still think they value highly having that King Power on that shirt.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Akash, do you have any more questions, or before we move on? Because again, I think this is one of the things where I had so many questions that this Rob's covered so many of them, most of them, to be honest.
Yeah, quick question. Talking about the King Power branding. So King Power owns two clubs. One is this one, and another one is OHL. So do you see this two clubs working together as a symbiotic relationship? Because the Red Bull Group has established a lot of clubs, and they interchange talent between them. They get sales like Patson Daka, Erling Haaland, or Takuma Minamino from around the globe. So I don't see any sort of direct exchange that can benefit Leicester at this point. So do you see in the future? Are there any plans around it?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's a difficult one because I know that when they bought OH Leuven, they said it's a separate entity and it's, you know, a second tier team similar to Leicester were, and they want to develop it and grow it, and that is very much the ambition. I've been over there a number of times. They do want to develop OH Leuven, but there is a relationship to be had, and we've seen that on a number of occasions, mostly with youngsters going over to Belgium and getting some experience. I mean, Daniel Iverson, I think he's out there right now. They've had other lads go out, Elliot Moore, but he moved on. The only one I can think of that's come the other way is George Hurst, the young striker that left Sheffield Wednesday, went to Leuven, and then signed for Leicester. I know that was a little bit controversial. But you know, he's out now on loan as well. So, you know, it's something that they can look at in terms of developing. Obviously, Brexit causes its own problems as well about getting players into this country now. But they can certainly go to Leuven and develop there. And if they're ready then and they then qualify, they can go from Leuven to Leicester. So there's always that as well. So, yeah, I think it's a mutual partnership.
Yeah, again, it's something that, again, as Akash was saying, there's I think other clubs develop it a lot more, but again, we'll see what happens in the future. Alex, any other
Man
questions?
United had Antwerp, didn't they, Neil? I mean, Man United had Antwerp for a while that were a bit of a partner, but I don't think they were actually owned by the same company like Leuven and Leicester is. So it
could have
is
been like a Luton Leicester jobby.
Yeah, well, Luton and Leicester it's just they're just very much on the same level in terms of football philosophy, and that's why it makes them attractive. Whereas literally Leuven and Leicester are owned by the same people, so that makes it a bit more symbiotic. Yeah,
definitely. Alex, any more questions?
Not on the summer window.
Okay, yeah, feel free to take it away.
No, you go next. I'm still trying to figure out I got so many different thoughts in my head right now. I gotta figure it out and put into a question.
No problem. Again, so the only problem that I've got that we've called, again, we've kind of, before the season started, just for a bit of context, Rob, we've called this person the Ghanaian excellence in terms of Daniel Amate, and he's coming up to the contract to the end of the year, and I think he's performed absolutely fantastically considering the injuries that have gone on around him. His contract is expiring in the summer. Could he turn into a leader that we could need at the back? Obviously, we'll see if he's part of the people that have moved on, but I would like him to stay because of the decent performances put in, and he's one of the players that's happy to stay in the bench and fight for his place rather than having to play every single week in, week out.
He's an interesting one, isn't he, Daniel? I mean, I really like him. He's such a softly spoken, quiet, reserved sort of character. I mean, incredibly religious. You know, everything is thanks to God for everything he's got. Even, you know, when some of the crippling, I mean, he broke his ankle on the night of the helicopter crash. You know, it's what a night that was. You know, but he's still, you know, so positive. He's very quiet though, so I don't know if he's a leader, But he's certainly shown his versatility. I mean, and his dependability as well. When Brendan calls upon him, whatever role it is, playing right backs, holding midfield. I mean, he used to say that he didn't think he could play as a centre back in a back four, in a back three, yes, but he's shown he can, and to the level now where he's one of the first ones that he'll look to now. You know, he's reliable. You know, he's not going to pull up any trees. He's not going to be the next Virgil van Dijk, but you know, he will do a job for you, and I think that's worth keeping him in your squad. Every squad needs somebody that can fill in and you can depend on them, and they'll be professional and they will do whatever they can for the team, and they won't complain. There's no ego. He won't say, "I'm not a right back. You're not playing me in my right position. This is detrimental to my career." He doesn't care. As long as he's playing, he'll go and do a job for you. If you stuck him up front, he'd run his nuts off trying to chase balls into the corridors for you. He would do that. He's that sort of character, and I think he's certainly one I would certainly keep round. I know to go to that next level, you know, you're looking at another level of quality of player to come in and then like to go Champions League, but you've still got to have a space in your squad for someone like Daniel Amati, I think.
Yeah, and I think one thing as well to kind of something we've seen a lot more as well is that obviously players that are flexible in multiple positions, but also players that can play in different systems in the same game. So I think we saw a lot of it last year where James Justin would play either right back or middle of a centre back or left back, right back, left of a back three, right of a back three. I mean, is that kind of the future again? Because I think Daniel Amati fits into that mold of right. We can stick you in the midfield, we can stick you at right back, we can stick you at centre of a back three, and we can see these players. I think one of them recently that was Lewis Brunt, who was playing as a double pivot with Tielemans, and then moved into a left of a back three role, which for me was phenomenal. I've never seen football played in that kind of fluid way, and where these even young players just adapt to, yeah, that's fine, I can just take the position and make it my own.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, you've got to be a footballer first and foremost. You know, you can play in multiple positions, but you've got to be comfortable on the ball. You've got to have awareness around you. You've got to be tactically aware. I always say it's great that, you know, when they're at younger age limits, like age groups, that they play in lots of different positions and they learn different positions. And so therefore they're comfortable with it. To being rigid and saying, look, I'm an attacking midfielder and that's it. You know, it's detrimental to your career. I mean, if you look through that squad now, I mean, I know circumstances have dictated this. I mean, it's necessity that so many of these players have had to play in different positions. But you look at Timothy Castagna, he's played in so many different positions. Ricardo Pereira's played on the right and the left. You know, we talked about Hamza playing in multiple positions. They've all got to be adaptable. And in terms of an attacking sense, we've seen Ademola Lookman play on the right, play on the left, even play down the middle against Watford in the FA Cup. You know, he's still got a bit of work to do, by the way, to secure that permanent transfer. But he's going in the right direction, I think. It's certainly, in terms of his performances over the last month or so, he's starting to show a bit more of his quality, but he has to do it consistently. I mean, that's what it is. That's the problem with the forward type players. They've got to do it consistently. Harvey Barnes was challenged with that. Damari Gray was challenged with that to get their numbers up in terms of goals and assists. Harvey delivered. Damari found it tougher. He had to go to Bayer Leverkusen, went to Everton, had a fantastic start. But for me, he started to drift a little bit again. He's got to pick his game up again at Everton. I love that kid. I think he's great, Damari Gray. But if he can get that consistency, what a player he'll be. But, you know, that's what Brendan's looking for. You know, he's looking for consistency. So Adam Alder's got, if he can do it over a sustained period between now and the end of the season, then they will probably try and make that deal a permanent one.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm hoping so, because I've had a little bit of faith when on the right-hand side, he's not looked as comfortable where he spent a lot of the time, obviously, with Harvey Barnes.
He's on the left.
He's on the left and through the middle, which is surprising.
This is the strange thing. When he came in, we all thought, well, we were told they wanted a left-footed player that could play on the right, and they haven't had one since. Well, they had Cengiz Under, could played left-footed on the right, but he didn't work. But Riyad Mahrez, that obviously you're never going to find another Riyad Mahrez. Unfortunately, he's the most talented player I've ever seen in a Leicester shirt. I'm sure most Leicester fans going back generations will say the same thing. He was just a wonderful footballer for Leicester. But they're trying to find somebody like that. Now, Ademola come in and they needed some more width in the squad. But he plays very similarly to Harvey. And when Harvey's on song, Harvey's in the side. I mean, he's had a few problems this season and Ademola's come to the fore, but he's not the left-footed, right-sided player that Leicester were looking for. So that search goes on, and that will probably go on into the summer as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. Hopefully, again, that's one of the positions that we can hopefully fill, because again, we've missed that Mahrez hole, but we know we're not going to fill it with Mahrez or that kind of ilk of player unless we spend 100 million, which is probably not going to happen. Alex, have you managed to think of the question yet?
So I did, but Rob already answered it with Lookman. But I do have another question because I was going to ask about the possibilities of signing Lookman on a permanent, but you've answered that really quickly, so I didn't have to worry about that. Another question I have is, we've been watching Kasper Schmeichel be our keeper for over 10 years, it seems. But then we have this backup in Danny Ward, and I feel like Danny Ward is when I look at him, he could easily be a starter for a lot of clubs in the Premier League. And he's still biding his time on the bench. Do you see him possibly in the summer, like asking for a transfer, or just remaining, patient, waiting on the bench, waiting for his time to get the opportunity?
You can't wait forever. He's such a talented goalkeeper, and we saw it for Wales in the Euros.
Mm-hmm.
He is, you're right, he's a number one, and he could be playing as a number one at a number of Premier League clubs right now. And he would walk into their teams. He is that good. And when he's played for Leicester, he's always looked that good. To the extent where a lot of fans this season have been suggesting it's time for Kasper to have a break and Danny to come in. Which is remarkable when you think the servant Kasper's been to the club. Was you one of them, Alex?
I've mentioned it a few times, actually, during our post matches. Yeah, as much as I like Schmeichel, and I think he's extremely reliable, I feel like you have such a solid 1-2 combo that why not rush Schmeichel when you can? Danny Ward is he's good enough to play.
Well, I spoke to his former coach, goalkeeper coach at Liverpool, for an article in The Athletic a while back, and he was saying he thought that when they signed Danny, it's because and I've mentioned it earlier in this broadcast about succession plans. Mm-hmm. He thought that Leicester were preparing for the departure of Kasper. And that's why they went and paid that much money, over £10 million for, I think it's £12 million actually, for Danny Ward, because they thought he was going to be their number one. And then Kasper stayed. And so it hasn't really worked out for Danny in that sense, because he hasn't played a lot of football. He's probably played more for Wales than he has for Leicester City. But he is a talent. He's a great shot stopper. Penalty saves. I remember that penalty shootout of Wolves in the Carabao Cup a couple of years ago. He was phenomenal in that. He's a good talker. He's a good presence around the place. He is a number one goalkeeper, but unfortunately, he's got a fantastic goalkeeper in Kasper Schmeichel. And I know fans have questioned him this season. I mean, he's not had a consistent back four in front of him nearly all season, which makes a difference. I know he doesn't dominate his 6-yard box. I know he doesn't come for crosses. He leaves it to defenders, but I many years ago I played as a fullback, and I didn't like was not knowing whether my goalkeeper was going to come or not for crosses or corners. If I knew he wasn't coming, I knew I had to deal with it, or my teammates had to deal with it. So I think the Leicester defence they've got to deal with it around that 6-yard box, because Kasper's a shot stopper. He likes to be a reactive goalkeeper. He can come and punch, but he doesn't come and claim. He doesn't come and clatter people. He doesn't come out with his knee up in the air and take people out to get to the ball. I mean, that's very old school goalkeeping. He's a different type of goalkeeper. So you accept him for what he is. But I think we saw against Brighton some of the saves he made at crucial times. Then he's still a hugely valued goalkeeper at Leicester City, and I still think he's the captain. He is a vocal leader. I mean, I have to emphasise, when you guys weren't in the stadium and it was just me and a bunch of journalists watching the games during lockdown, you could hear everything he said, Kasper, and it was relentless. And the referees would have heard everything he said, and there wasn't a referee that didn't get a broadside from him at various points. whether it was claiming that the opposition goalkeeper was wasting time or whatever. You know, he wouldn't be slow to tell them what he thought. So, you know, he's a very vocal leader on the pitch, and I think they need that.
Yeah, and hopefully, again, we'll see how it happens. Obviously, with the contract being out in 2023, what happens? I'm not saying he's going anywhere, but at the same time, it is interesting to see what happens. Akash, have you got any other questions before we wrap up? Because, again, I can't believe it. 53 minutes, 54 minutes has flown by.
So, Brendan Rodgers, some of the comments that Brendan Rodgers made this season has been controversial for the fans to digest. Some of it may be true, some of it may be untrue, but it looks very less ambitious when you judge that we have been pushing for that barrier to get into the Champions League football again. So,
Yeah.
how do you see that from the press room?
Yeah, I can understand that. I can understand how that can be perceived. As I say, I'm in all the Zoom press conferences. I mean, I emphasise it'd be much better if we were face to face as we used to be, because how it used to work at the press conferences was we used to go into a room and the TV cameras would be set up behind on a stage at the back, and then we'd have what's called the broadcast section. That would be for the rights holders. And then that would finish, and then Brendan would take the written press members into the players' lounge at King Power Stadium. We used to sit around a little coffee table, have a cup of coffee, and just talk. And he was much more comfortable in that. You know, he's much more on the spot in terms of the Zoom, because everything's recorded and it's sent out. But what I think he's tried to do recently, and I know it hasn't gone down very well with quite a few fans, is he's tried to be realistic. And now some fans will say he's just covering himself or he's making excuses. But I think it's a dose of reality, really, when you look at the injury problems they've had this season. There is mitigation there. Now, I'm not saying that you can't be ambitious, and fans should still dream and they should still be ambitious, and they should still want Leicester City to be up there challenging for Champions League and European qualification. Absolutely. And I don't think Brendan Rodgers is any less ambitious, but what he's been trying to say is, because there has been a lot of stick, even though they're still mid-table, look at the injuries. Look at the problems they've had. Now, you know, there's another debate about the injuries, about the departure of Dave Rennie and what have you. I still argue a lot of those injuries are unavoidable. But, you know, when you at one stage had 17 senior outfield players unavailable. 17. I've never experienced that in my 25 years being a football journalist, to see that many players out for various reasons: COVID, injuries, African Cup of Nations. I know some people said that isn't a reason to be calling off a game. If you've only got 1 or 2 COVID cases, they should play. You should play the under-23s and under-18s. As I said earlier, it's not that simple. But I think what he was trying to point out, that if you lose Jamie Vardy for 8 weeks, at the same time as Johnny Evans, at the same time as Timothy Castagna, at the same time as Ricardo Pereira, if you're losing all these players, these key players to you, then you're not going to have consistency, because there has been no consistency in terms of selection this season, because there hasn't been consistency in terms of availability of players this season. So you're chopping and changing. Not only you're chopping and changing personnel because of necessity, you're then chopping and changing your tactics as well to suit the players you've got available. So there's no consistency, so you can't get any momentum. When you can't get any momentum, you get inconsistency in terms of the performance and the results, and then the fans get frustrated. So then you're sat in a press conference trying to say why you think that is the case. And he was asked, he said, where do you see Leicester City being at right now? In terms of that was the spark, that question that sparked that response about reaching a pinnacle. So I have some sympathy for him there, but I still think Leicester fans should be allowed to be ambitious and dream, because they've lived the dream. I mean, we're not going to get 2016 again. That was just a one-off, 5,000 to 1. Akash, you've read my book. It's, you know, it was the most extraordinary fairy tale. Yeah, exactly. Anybody who hasn't got it, go and read it, buy it. New edition out now. Well. Yeah, so, you know, it was such an extraordinary fairy tale. I don't think we'll ever see the like again at any club of that sort of nature. But Leicester have been ambitious for a number of years now, and I think they just that the fans want to keep the dream going, and I think the club want to keep the dream going. They're aspirational. I mean, look at as I said, the plans for the stadium, the plans for the training ground. They are aspirational. They do ambitious, but they've got to be realistic as well. And this season, unfortunately, they've lost too many players to injuries at terrible times. It continues to be happening. A lot of it has been going on for a number of years. I don't think it's just this season in isolation. I think from the moment lockdown has started, and then we had the condensed fixtures when we restarted, we picked up a load of injuries then towards the end of that, because the players' bodies are just creaking because of the demands. And I heard somebody say, well, it used to be tougher in the 70s and the 80s. The pitches were harder and they cut up, and people smash each other and stuff like that. But the game's faster. It's just the speed of the game now, the intensity. Sometimes I'm out of breath watching it from the press bench. It's that fast, and it's relentless for 90 minutes. If anybody used to watch football in the 80s, the ball used to be pumped long, the centre half would head it back, they'd have a little battle for it in midfield, it'd get pumped long again, pumped long. They're not covering the ground then. They are now. They're just relentless athletes now. And if you're playing like that twice a week, 3 times a week over a sustained period, the body's going to break down. And I'll give you a classic example of that. Charles Suyunsu. Because of all the injuries to centre-backs and defenders at the start of the season, he had to play when perhaps he could have been resting for a Carabao Cup game. Perhaps he could have been resting for a Europa League game. But Brendan Rodgers had no choice, didn't have any other centre-halves available, to the extent where he played 25 games. And the one game he didn't start, he came on at half-time. So he's only missed 45 minutes. Plus he played 4 times for Turkey. So that's 29 games he's played in a short period of time. No wonder his hamstring went. No wonder. It's not rocket science.
Yeah. And the fact he's managed to recover from that and then get back on and start playing again, back in that position as well. So,
and he's not been at his best this season as well. He's suffered as well because defenders like that, having that same regular partner with them that they know that's going to cover them and takes out that indecision. When you're going to attack a ball, somebody's covering behind you. When you've got a different guy behind you every time, you don't know that. It can be disruptive. So again, another bit of mitigation for his up and down performances. And again, some fans have been getting on his back, but I think there's reasons for that as well. I think once you get Johnny Evans back and you get a stable back four again and Fofana, you'll see the best of Suyunsu again.
Yeah, we're hoping so. Alex, any more questions before we finish? Again, we've been an hour now, and it's just flown by. But any more questions, because I've exhausted all of them, and I think we might have exhausted Rob as well.
No, I all my questions have been answered. I think I have more answers than I have questions, so it's been successful. It's been great.
And finally, Akash, any questions for you before we finish?
No, I'm out.
No problem. Rob, thank you so much for that. I probably should have plugged this right at the beginning, but your 5,000 to 1 part 2, 5 years on, is now out as well. It's been out for a while now. So what can you tell me? Obviously, what encouraged you to write that book about the 5,000 to 1 part 2? Because obviously, as you were saying, the Premier League season was an unbelievable season. It could have all ended there, but what made you want to write the part 2 as well?
I think after 5 years, and so much had happened in that 5 years. I mean, it's not a completely new book. It's a revised edition of 5,000 to 1, because you can't have the last 5 years without telling that story, that incredible story at the start. So we decided to do 5 new chapters covering the last 5 years, not like chronologically each year, but picking topics, things that have happened, because it's been so eventful. We've had the incredible highs of the FA Cup final. We've had the incredible lows of the helicopter crash. So much has been going on ever since. The sacking of Ranieri, the Champions League. It's an incredible club to cover, Leicester City. There's always something going on. There's always a story to tell. I know a lot of clubs might say this, but Leicester City, it's never dull. It's always interesting. Something's going on. And I know sometimes fans get them a little bit frustrated and they get a little bit down, but they're following a club that is extraordinary. It really is an extraordinary club in terms of what happens and the people around the club and the stories behind them. So I feel very privileged to be covering them still after 11 years now, and been able to write their books as well. And I'm sure there'll be many more stories to tell in the years to come.
Yeah, and I'm really hoping to look forward to the ones as well. And then finally, obviously, where can the people find you, and what articles have you got coming up for The Athletic as well?
Well, The Athletic, we're an app. It's been bought by the New York Times. We're an app, and you can get it online as well. And I do 3 Leicester City articles a week. I've got one coming out tomorrow morning all about Luke Thomas and whether he should be involved in the conversation for the England left-back berth. Now Ben Chilwell's out. Should he be involved? He's only played 52 senior games, 20 odd of them in the Premier League, but he could be a shout. So I've got that one coming up, and also the recruitment one as well.
Yeah, that's brilliant. If you've enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for Rob for coming on again. Link to his socials and things down below in the description. Thank you for coming on. We'll catch you all for the preview for the Liverpool game. We'll see you all then. So goodbye.